In the future war, there are many fates worse than death, but by far the most feared is the capture by Skynet and being placed into a so-called labour or internment camp. Make no mistake, these camps deal in only one currency, death, and the horrors of these places will echo through the ages. But it falls to me to tell the tale, so when the time comes you can avoid such a future. So pay attention, soldiers. This report might just give you the information that may save your life. Now, prison camps seem the opposite of what Skynet would do, as its main goal is to exterminate mankind, and camps seem like an extra step in that process. Well, first we need to ask ourselves, why would Skynet devote resources, which in the early stages of the future war it was massively short on, into this expensive project? Now, many have theorised why Skynet would build these camps, but there are several proven facts. First, Skynet used these facilities for research and development, especially into the organic camouflage that covers its later Terminator models. Skynet needed human prisoners not only to study and develop this biochemical process, but to make its Terminator's skin, but also so it could collect enough biological material to create this skin. Models such as the T-700 needed a fresh skin every few weeks, as it was necrotic, so it required fresh humans to be kept ready and available. Another part of its research was the study of human behaviour and psychology. Single prisoners to large groups were kept alive and watched to gather data, and when enough information was gathered, while the prisoners were tortured and dissected to work out the best ways to kill and inflict pain. There was also an even particularly horrible report of a T-600 with rubber skin and a horrific smile painted on its face. It was nicknamed Nurse Ratchet, which would take the weakest prisoners every week for study. Those poor souls were never seen again. Some camps were simply large traps where Skynet, through its use of human collaborators such as the Luddite fanatics, would find and befriend civilians, promising food, water and shelter if they followed them to these facilities. Once there, they would be scanned and given a laser barcode, and if they were of value, would be sent to other facilities or put to work. Unfortunately, for the humans deemed useless, they would be killed quickly and quietly, then put into a so-called grinder. These were massive disposal units which would either burn the bodies or mulch the bodies into a slurry. Now, what became of this slurry isn't fully known. My personal theory is that it was used in Skynet's research or turned into some kind of disgusting food paste in which to feed the other prisoners. And if people doubt this, well, where did Skynet keep getting the food for its human captives? Because in my time in the waste, I didn't see any farms or Costco's. Well, not that hadn't been nuked anyway. For the humans that were allowed to live, they were used in labour. Now, Skynet, after the events of Judgment Day and its early battles in the future war, realised humanity would not go quietly into the night. We had far more fighting us than it could imagine. So now, with its ramping up of hunter-killer production, its logistics began to falter. How could it wage a global war if it couldn't get the materials it needed to make its machines? Well, it saw the solution to this in the scared and scattered civilians, who may not have been on Skynet's side, but were not part of the resistances either. These isolated and desperate humans would be worked literally to death until Skynet could find a more mechanical solution to its labour issues. The work would vary from mining, refining and hauling the materials Skynet needed. Actual production was still kept in Skynet's hands and its fully automated factories, as there was no way Skynet would allow humans near its precious machines. It could not risk sabotage or inferior human brains making mistakes and causing the finished products to be below standards. So humanity was the base labour, simple yet back-breaking tasks, and Skynet made sure to keep the humans motivated in the worst ways. Living prisoners also gave Skynet access to viable intelligence. With its advanced AI, it could tell lies from the truth, and would inflict horrifying tortures to extract every last detail of information, from everything where civilians were hiding, to the location of resistance installations. And rumours are that Skynet, in the more desperate stages of the war, would specifically set the Terminators in charge of torture's brains to read and write mode, but with its subroutines to take a form of pleasure in inflicting pain. Now, it's not known how this exactly worked, with the machine consciousness being what it is, but it truly is an insight into the twisted reality Skynet has created. One odd use of prisoners is very overlooked. Human shields. Now, this worked very well as the resistance, even in their most desperate stages, tried to save the lives of civilians. So installations with prisoners in would have to be liberated far more carefully. Simply bombing them would obviously kill the prisoners, which went against the resistance's main goal of saving humanity. But also, if they did sacrifice these people because the target was so important and had to be destroyed, well, this news would be spread of the resistance's brutality, and Skynet and its human collaborators could use this in their own propaganda efforts. I must mention Skynet didn't worry too much about people dying of exhaustion, as there were always fresh captives to replace them. If anything, this installed a work or die ethic into the prisoners. Ironically, a large amount were simply dropping due to the intensity of the labour, and reports vary, but 12 to 16-hour shifts were very common. Fellow resistant operatives even informed me that some camps had 24-hour shifts with an average life expectancy of 4 days. This is coming up to Amazon distribution levels of brutality. The condition in the camps varied, but it's safe to say it was always dire, below even some of the worst third world nations pre-Judgment Day. Every camp was built for efficiency, and anything else that was needed was a secondary thought. The priority of the camps went as follows. First, the base function, so mining, transportation, and the refining of resources efficiently as possible. Second, security, to protect the camp from outside and to keep prisoners from escaping. Third, the ability to support other installations and potentially resupply frontline units. Number 4 was basic amenities, so keeping the prisoners alive. This included food, water, and shelter only. Number 5 was disposal facilities, not because Skynet respected the dead, but because it didn't want bodies piling up, not only scaring new prisoners, but also blocking access to resources. And finally, number 6 was luxury resources such as beds, washing areas, and medical support if it was deemed necessary. As you can tell, Skynet's priority was production and resources, and everything else was just a necessity. The layout of the facilities followed the efficiency mindset, and Skynet made sure to use strong and robust materials such as concrete and steel. These are obviously difficult to break out of and would last a long time. No effort at all was spent making them safe though, and jagged edges and things that could catch prisoners were common. Prisoner safety was not in the calculation. The only time Skynet made really safe cells and things like clean rooms were in its research facilities, where the sterile environments were a must. Skynet did repurpose old buildings, especially military bases, large factories and warehouses, into prison facilities. These would be retrofitted and patched up to fit its needs. Next, defences had to be organised. Now, early on in the future war, these camps would have relatively light protection, with things like a basic chain-link fence with barbed or razor wire to deter escapes and some sentries. Most likely the T-200 or 400, whichever was most available at the time. Very rarely did any of its installations come under assault early on, and in a sense, Skynet became complacent. But as the war raged on and the resistance began to target camps from the outside, and rebellions rose up from within, Skynet quickly realised it was on a two-front war, one on the battlefield and one in its own prisons. But it still needed the labour and research, so security measures had to be ramped up. Now we see Skynet construct mega camp with defences that would make even American maximum security prisons jealous. The outer perimeters would now be surrounded with large concrete walls, normally 15 to 30 foot high, topped with large amounts of razor wire to entangle any brave escapees. And in more advanced facilities, laser fences were installed, which could even slice a T-800 in half. On the outer side of the walls would be a mix of anti-tank traps to stop vehicles and concrete barriers. We would also see minefields with a mix of basic anti-personnel and anti-tank mines to deter any resistance assaults. More important facilities would get smart mines that could be activated and deactivated to let transports of prisoners and resources enter and exit. There are even reports of large shrapnel-clad mines that were designed to injure and leave any prisoners who tried to escape wounded and bleeding out for hours or even days, with their cries for help being a reminder that you belong to Skynet now. These defences were backed up by sentry guns ranging from smaller light machine gun turrets all the way up to plasma cannons being able to deal with even main battle tanks, and high priority installations also had anti-aircraft batteries, supplemented by watchtowers manned with Terminators, and as Skynet began to produce more advanced models such as the T-600 onwards, the T-400 and T-500 began to be used a lot more for security. These frontline machines were overkill for security details. It made escape almost suicidal, and to attack a prison camp was now a major assault requiring troops, armoured vehicles and support to have any chance of success. Some of the machines designed to guard the camp seem to be robotic dogs. The reports are limited, but me and my intelligence operatives believe there is credence to this information. Another horrific entry into the HK series. Don't worry though, I've got the best operatives in the Resistance, digging deep to uncover the truth, and we will find and kill these metal monsters. All these lethal defences were backed up by security cameras covering every nook and cranny internally, and externally seeing miles around the facility in every direction. Then there were visual scanners that would only allow access to select machines and human personnel. These were linked with the doors and gates in the facilities. They tended to be reinforced steel doors all the way up to massive blast doors that were designed to take direct plasma cannon shots. Nearly indestructible, I'm told. And in some cases, resistance forces found it easier to tunnel through solid reinforced concrete foundations than actually go through these huge blast doors. And if you managed to get past these defences, well, Skynet had redundancy protocols in high-value facilities, such as the detonation of large amounts of explosives to releasing poisonous gas to kill the prisoners. So you may capture the prison, but you won't save a single life. This made the resistance very reluctant to liberate prisons unless they knew exactly what they were going into, and normally it would require help of reprogrammed or rogue Terminators to do so successfully. On arrival to a prison, all prisoners were catalogued. First, they would undergo full body and facial recognition scans to make sure they had no contrabands or weapons hidden, and to identify them against Skynet's databases to see if they were a person of interest. Then the physical state was checked to make sure they were fit enough for the work, and if they passed these checks they would receive a laser barcode, so they were permanently branded as a prisoner of Skynet. This would also double up as a way for Skynet to collect genetic information for its database and research purposes. Once they entered the living and work areas of the prison, where they would spend the rest of their short lives, they saw the terrible state they would have to live with. Dirt, filth and grime coated the place, and the only things that seemed clean were the Skynet's machines and security systems. But anything to do with human prisoners was of no consideration. This illustrated that the machines are the most important part of the areas, and disease and illness was rife in the tight confines of the prisons. Prisoners rarely received any type of uniform. They were clad in whatever clothes they arrived in and stripped of any decent clothing. And even if put on tasks such as steel production or mining, they received no safety gear. Injuries during these tasks were very common, and if someone became too weak or ill to work, human collaborators known as Greys would hurl them from the line, never to be seen again. And other facilities, such as the one that was mining copper, had prisoners being caught in mining machinery and decapitated, which led to other prisoners being beaten for allowing human matter to jam up the machine's moving parts and reduce production numbers. And if these poor souls survived the shifts, their living quarters were terrible. Made from reinforced steel and concrete, they were freezing in the winter months and boiling hot in the summer. There was very rarely any running water or light, and many compared life here to living in a sewer. And if they had human collaborator guards, regular beatings, assaults and murders were common, as Skynet seemed to let these guards off the hook as long as the production stayed up to quota. Getting food was another way Skynet kept prisoners under tabs. You would only get fed if your tasks were completed 100%, and the failure to reach target would result in automatic cut in rations, and for every percent below 95, more severe disciplinary measures would be deployed. A report informs me that a 7% drop in production of steel in one camp resulted in the loss of limbs for the failing workers, and the actual food they were fed was either from pre-Judgment Day sources, or it was a nutrient paste made from unknown methods. In Skynet's research facilities, some human prisoners needed to be kept healthy. Reports suggest they were well fed, clothed and looked after to a very high standard, but what fate would await these prisoners in the long run would most likely be something terrible. And one thing that was strictly prohibited in the prisons was pregnancy. If a woman was found to be pregnant, she would be taken away and never seen again. No one knows exactly what would happen to them, but we can assume the worst. In the situation where Skynet found it no longer needed human prisoners, and it was too resource intensive to transport them to another facility, termination of all prisoners would occur in a brutal and quick fashion, with all Terminators and human collaborator guards killing indiscriminately. And once the prisoners were dealt with, Skynet would turn the machine on its own human allies, if they were deemed non-essential. A fitting end for such low-life turncoats, and I must say, some reports indicate the facility being wiped off the map in cases where vital research had been conducted, and Skynet wanted to leave no evidence for any resistance forces. I think my report proves that capturing these prisons and liberating the prisoners should be high on the resistance priority list. Not only will it take away valuable resources and research from Skynet, but every life we save is another soldier for the battlefield potentially. It's simple numbers. We need everybody we can get, as we are getting closer to the extinction point every day. I hope I've been able to persuade the Resistance High Command. But if not, think of your loved ones. Imagine if they were trapped in these prisons. What would you do to stop their suffering? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. A bit of a fun one for me. You know, a bit of lore in there and a bit of fan-made content as well. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, obviously, do tell me. Tell me what you thought of this one. Thanks for watching, guys. And you guys have a beautiful day.